All right, guys, we're going to welcome back to the Everything College Football podcast. Today, me and Nick are doing 2024 preview and prediction for the Purdue Boilermakers. Looking at this coaching staff, Ryan Walters, 4-8 debut season, was previously the offensive coordinator at Illinois. Returns for the second year in the role is offensive coordinator Graham Harrell and Kevin Kane, second year on staff here. 29th ranked recruiting class for the Boilermakers, an improvement from 58th in 2023. So nice work there to join the top 30 by Purdue. Look at the offensive side of the ball. This is a unit that certainly underperformed. Graham Harrell brings an air raid approach from his time at USC, up and down tenure there, and obviously just wasn't great overall. This is a team that does return 6 starters. They do lose their top 5 pass catchers, though. It was a hot and cold offense for them. They had 300-plus rushing yards, for example, against Northwestern, but they only scored 15 points, had 4 turnovers. A lot of frustrating stuff from this offense. You look at Hudson, a guy who does have a dual-threat skill set, shows some solid pocket navigation, but at times makes bad movements, often looks to run instead of showcasing patience when going through his reads. He can throw on the run, though, showed the ability to rip it on a line, has shown ball placement accuracy in the past, operates quite well from a clean pocket. Under pressure, he does really get rattled, doesn't always step into his throws. 6'3", 210, guy previously at Texas. Probably one of the better quarterbacks, Nick, in this conference, playing at a lesser attractive school, but last year he didn't always play like that. In the season finale, I thought against Indiana, he was really good. In the game against Minnesota 2 weeks earlier, he also was. Didn't play against Northwestern. That was the game again with the offense. Put up yards, not many points. But Carter's finding a better rhythm late in the year, Nick. Had 250-plus yards and 3 touchdowns through the air in each of those games. Do you think he could ride that momentum into the new year?
Hudson Card's a solid player, didn't really have a great season. Comes over from Texas last year, looked to be a solid player for this program. Below 6% comp rate at 58.9, 2,300 yards passing, 15 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. That is solid on the ground as well. You can really use him in a dual threat. 203 yards and 5 scores on the ground. So I think he's a player that has some potential to grow. That interception rate, you got to find a way to bring that down. The completion percentage is not great. Want to find a way to raise that. Graham Harrell was working with him all offseason. Yes, it's that Graham Harrell, the one from Texas Tech, the legend himself that has been around at various stops in college football and found himself in Purdue at this point in time, not Peru, the soccer team. Purdue, that is, and I think he's a good, offensive coordinator that can really develop and turn this offense into something fun. They brought in some solid players. They added some decent players we're going to talk about in a second. And I think Hudson Card's a guy that's continuing to develop and play more up to his potential. I think he can play to that potential this year. We saw it in flashes at Texas and flashes last year that he's a really solid starting quarterback. He just needs to keep focused, cut down on the turnovers and be a little more focused in the pocket, a little better with the footwork. I think he can succeed.
And obviously they had a 4-game stretch of Iowa, Ohio State, Nebraska, Michigan, 3 of those games on the road. Those are elite defenses, Nick, and his numbers in those games were just flat out poor, as was the rest of the unit. That's a great reality check for any football players, that 4-game stretch there. And you want to look at some of the weapons he has. Obviously, again, they lose a lot of pass catchers, a complete makeover here. 4-star from the class of 22, and C.J. Smith from Georgia step into a starting role here, a player of great speed in ball tracking abilities. He'll need to improve route running to be a star contributor, though. Jamal Edrine was a good producer for FAU in 22, tore his ACL last season after transferring him. They're hoping to get him back at full strength. Andrew Sawinski, Jaden Dixon-Veal have been around a couple of years, not much production. D-Nylon Morsetti, also a former Bulldog, is a 4-star coming out of high school. Cam Brown from UCLA, a solid addition, but only 93 total targets in 5 years of ball for him. Tight end Max Clare, though, he was off to a great start before getting hurt. In only 5 games, he still was the team's 5th leading pass catcher. George Burnham had 5 grabs for 75 yards in the season finale against Indiana. Nothing before that, though. Drew Bieber, less than stellar as an inline blocker. So they might have something here in some of their tight ends and a couple of Georgia transfers. Nick, what do you think of this receiving core that really is just all over the place? Injuries, guys that didn't have playing time at their previous destination. And again, those tight ends are incredibly young who, were able to produce in spurts.
There's certainly some room to grow. Max Clare in 5 games, 196 yards receiving for him. He's a guy that could definitely grow up. Jaden Dixon-Veal, I think he's a guy that could certainly be involved at the wide receiver Z. 140 yards receiving for him and 1 score for him this past season. The rest of the room, you highlighted some other guys. Cam Brown could be a high-impact transfer in the slot. Some other players there. I think C.J. Smith could be a solid transfer as well. This room is a little weak, though. I think there certainly is some issues, a lot of turnover and a lot of question marks, in my opinion.
And, they look at the running back room. Depth is slim for them, but I definitely think this is a strong area with Devin Maccabee leading the way. A player who moves very well, gets upfield with authority, really good in the short area, accelerates well out of his cuts at 6', 200. Physical, upright running style. Has good intensity to him. Has no issues laying the boom. 8 fumbles over this past season. That's just not a good number. Reggie Love, respectable backup for Illinois, arrives. Great ball security from him on the other hand. An efficient runner. Not much depth in this group. A 3-star true freshman athlete, Jaheim Merriweather, figures to be the number 3. And obviously last year, Tyrone Tracy was a pretty good player, over 6 yards per carry. Should probably be a pretty respectable player in the NFL. Again, though, Nick, this is a great running back in Maccabee. I think he's been really good the last 2 years. 8 fumbles, though. He had 3 of them early on in the year against Syracuse. This is a guy who only had 2 games of 100-plus yards. They need to find ways to get him the ball more because when he's able to produce, this offense is very good.
I like Maccabee a lot, 811 yards on the ground, 4.7 yards per carry, 6 scores. Also had 19 receptions for 180 yards and a touchdown out of the backfield. 172 carries, the 8 fumbles is certainly concerning. I am worried about that. But overall, I do like Maccabee. I think he's a guy that's a really solid player. Reggie Love, underrated player from Illinois, transfers over. I think he's a very exciting player that could potentially be a breakout star for this offense. I think Love is a really good running back who transfers over here to Purdue. I think he's a really solid player as that number 2 back. Maccabee and Love, it's a nice 1-2 punch there.
The offensive line, they return 4 starters, but not all may have a starting role for this upcoming season. Mamani Mozat was horrid at left tackle, might move him to left guard. It's Corey Stewart arrives from Ball State, who was a quite impressive player over the last 3 years at left tackle. Gus Hartwig was a good center. He's a key returnee for them. I'd consider him a good starter. Jalen Grant played 800-plus snaps. Should provide some nice depth on the interior, as they do add DJ Wingfield from New Mexico, who was a very good right guard at his previous destination. He does jump to the Big Ten now. Marcus Mabau is this team's best lineman and probably the team's best player. Was stellar right guard, 22, started at right tackle last fall, was having a great year before getting hurt 6 games into the season. I think this will be an improved unit with some better depth. I like the portal adds they have. Obviously, some growing pains may be in store. But I think when you're looking at the tackle positions, these are going to be pretty solidified at some point in the season. I think people are going to start recognizing Mabau and Stewart as being a pretty good duo that's hard to crack.
I like Stewart. I think he's a really solid player. You can move him around Mabau as well. A really good player at right tackle. A really solid player. I think DJ Wingfield could step up and be a really good guard. Gus Hartwig is a really good leader at center. This is an offensive line that has some issues, but I do think it's a unit that returns some solid starters that could step up, some guys that could be involved. I do like what this unit could look like.
You look at the verdict for this side of the ball. Offense underwent a scheme change last season, and it wasn't a smooth one, but they had an impressive 3-game stretch to end the year. Card is a capable QB, and I like Maccabee at running back. The rest of the supporting cast seems lackluster. Modest improvement should occur up front, but overall, they likely probably won't take many steps forward. I definitely think there's some nice potential though with Card and these receivers. If they can, play to the potential they're probably going to at Georgia, there's no shame in leaving, elite program for not getting playing time. I think that's one thing that needs to be noted, as these guys are still high-end recruits from high school, and they're probably going to be able to produce here at a lower-tier school. The offensive side of the ball, Ryan Walters, obviously, defensive guru for Illinois. They just weren't very good last year. 30.4 points per game. They only returned 5 starters. Good news for them, though, is all 3 nose tackle contributors are back. 6', 290, Mo Amande, the best one. He was good versus the run. Made some waves as an interior pass rusher. Cole Brevard wasn't as strong, but at 6'3", 335 is a healthy big body. He'll be on the field often. DeMarje Lewis is 6'3", 295, should get on the field in some capacity. And then Joe Anderson, he was a quite good player versus the run. Another veteran they're glad to have back. Enters his 6th year of CFP. And I'd say the edge department is in quite good shape. They added Sheeta Shyla from Boston College, who's been good whenever he is on the field. Quality run defender in his own right. Added CJ Madden from Georgia, excited for his upside. Solid transfers overall. Losing Nick Scorchon is going to be, missed badly, Nick. He was elite for them, goes to Texas A&M. Will Helt played a fair amount of snaps as a freshman. He's going to have to step into a lead defensive end role now. It's going to be hard to get these guys unlocked after losing an elite talent, Nick. But again, the size they return in the middle might just be a key for them.
Will Holtz is a really solid player, 12 tackles for loss, or 12 total tackles, that is 1 tackle for loss. Cole Pavard, 9 total tackles, limited snaps, 2.5 tackles for loss for him. I like those numbers that I've seen out of him. I think he's a solid player overall who could really be very useful for this defense. I think Joe Anderson's a guy that you return, a good leader, 16 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss for him. Solid numbers. They made some nice moves adding CJ Madden out of the portal, a guy that thinks a high upside player. This front part of this defense does lose some talent, certainly with some of the players they lost, mainly Scruton like you suggested, but overall I think this is a unit that has some solid pieces.
Good news is they return Crichton Jenkins, who At the same time, won't be coming off the edge, another loss for them, but it's going to move to a more key role as an inside linebacker. He'll still find time off the edge, in critical situations, but he just has good instincts to allow him to be effective versus the run. Was an elite producer. The versatility should pay big dividends for this defense, so I think the move to the inside for this linebacking core is going to be tremendous. Yanni Karloffitz played better towards the end of the season, but it's time for him to really evolve into a game changer. The rest of this group is unproven. Hudson Miller, Owen Davis logging pretty much no snaps up until this point of this 3-4 defense. And again, I just want to kind of focus on Jenkins, Nick, because this is a player who's been pretty good for them for a couple of seasons now. The numbers from last year speak for themselves. This is a guy I think is really going to make waves in this conference this year and even double up some of this production.
This is certainly a really solid unit on this middle part of this defense. It has some really exciting players. I look at Jenkins. He's a really good player. 57 total tackles, 15.5 tackles for loss, 7.5 sacks. Really good numbers there. A really solid player. Moving him into the interior linebacking position could really be a big move for him. Potentially a really large return for opportunity there. He also returned a fumble for a touchdown last year. Yanni Karloffitz, a really solid player. 55 total tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks. Good numbers from him. I like this linebacking core. I think this is a very solid unit. Hudson Miller, Owen Davis add some nice depth as well. I'm excited for this unit.
You look at the back end, the secondary, it's pretty exciting. The CB group is deep, lots of commits, and 2 portal adds in Kendrick Breedlove and Nyland Green from Colorado and Georgia, respectively. Green, a player I thought would have made an impact for the Bulldogs by now. Instead comes to West Lafayette. He's going to find playing time. Arcavius Brown started last year, but was pretty absurd in coverage. Derek Rogers was no good in his first season of play. Botros Alessandro was an elite tackler, pretty good versus the run. A freshman 4-star and Coy Beasley could find his way onto the field this fall. A group I think the staff is pretty happy with. The strong safety spot typically sees a lot of man coverage, opening the door for a variety of different options. Antonio Stevens appears to be the favorite, though. Played a fair amount last season. They do add Sterling Smith from Holy Cross, and Joseph Jefferson appear to be in line to be the backups of that safety position. The secondary was 5th in FBS and fewest opponent completion rating allowed. They just never really clicked versus tougher opponents, and they had some guys playing out of position as well. And obviously, we're going to talk about the elite specimen at safety, Nick. But I want you to allude to the other group before we get to him.
Yeah, certainly we'll look at some of these solid players. I think Brown's a guy that could be involved and step up for this team. 45 total tackles from last year, 6 pass breakups. That is good numbers there. Antonio Stevenson, 17 total tackles, 2 fumble recoveries as well. A guy that you can move him around, strong safety. I think he's a guy that has some ability to grow. Nyland Green's a really good add at cornerback. He could really play solid, nice press, really good player in coverage as well. A really solid add overall. I think he could be an impact player here in West Lafayette. Really solid, gets that playing time he wasn't getting at Georgia, a former top recruit. Solid add in my opinion, and obviously we're going to talk about the key player on this defense here in a second.
That being Dylan Feineman. This is just a complete miss by the recruiting agencies. A 3-star coming out of the state of Indiana. They're able to keep him home, about an hour, 2 hours away from West Lafayette is where he was born and raised. And this guy was phenomenal. 106 tackles, 6 interceptions at the same time. When you watch film on him, this guy was just elite in all facets as a true freshman. Has such great closing ability, matched with his instincts, tracks the ball so impressively, moves downhill with such pace, and has eye-hand hit power. He's got great ball skills as well. Overall, this is a great football player, Nick. I know it's only 1 year of tape, but man, you can't get much better than this guy was. Especially on a lot of these interceptions, it seemed like he was not in frame one bit. All of a sudden comes over, makes a great play on the ball. This is a complete miss by the recruiting agencies, but a massive hit for Purdue.
This is a huge player that could really be a star in college football. Surprised he's staying home. 6'2", 205. In the area, didn't have a whole lot of offers out of high school. Ball State, Indiana, Minnesota, Northwestern, Toledo. These are the type of offers this guy was getting. And like you said, a complete miss because this guy has been an absolute star early on. You rattled off his stats. The 6 interceptions, I think, is very impressive combined with being the team's top tackler. You don't really see that a whole lot. Either one guy is really good at coverage or one guy is really good at tackling if they're a secondary piece that has those such high numbers. This guy has high tackle numbers and a high interception rate. Really solid in coverage. Really good high football IQ. Really good ball skills. And a great leader at safety. This is a guy that's continued to be a star. I'm super excited to see what he can do. He's absolutely elite. A guy that's really changing the game in the secondary for Purdue. I'm glad he's sticking it out because I'm excited to see what he can look like in this Boilermakers secondary. A very exciting player that's continued to develop into a star.
He had 8 tackles, a TFL, and 2 picks in that season finale win against Indiana, which was a highly competitive rivalry game to close out the season. So this guy showed up when it mattered most. The verdict for me on this side, is Walter's defense at Illinois has really gelled in his second season there. And the same seems imminent for 2024. Obviously the Illinois unit was one of the best in the country. Don't think you're going to see that type of play But Purdue returns a good amount of players at all levels, and they've been aggressive in bringing in fresh faces in competition. I think Jenkins will have an elite year, while Thyman's going to lead an improved secondary. And again, I think this team, this part of the team makes some big strides. The linebacking core is a bit concerning, and maybe even the pass rush as well. But I think overall you're going to see some, big-time improvements under Walter's unit. Looking at the schedule preview and prediction, bringing in 4 players from Georgia is an underrated strategy, as those are still high-caliber players who could really provide an asset with some newfound playing time. The defense, again, should take some big steps forward, but will an offensive unproven supporting cast and a shaky O-line be able to help out Card and Maccabee enough? That's going to be the biggest question. A solid team here. The schedule is very tough, some bad road draws. They do host Notre Dame and Penn State, but they have a weird, week 2 bye week. Should battle in those games against PSU and Irish, but I don't think they're going to win them, Nick. I think this is going to be a tough year for Purdue. Again, the schedule is just really tough, and it's really hard to find many wins on this schedule. And even though I do think the defense will improve a good bit, they still did allow over 30 points per game, so the improvements aren't going to exactly lead to victories. Again, I think some of these home games, Nick, they will be interesting to watch, at least for a couple of quarters. And I think you have some interesting trap games on here as well for those teams like Oregon and Penn State, and even the Irish, where West Lafayette has been proven to be a tough place to play.
West Lafayette's a tough place to play. Dreams go to die out there. Purdue has been known to upset teams in the past. Everyone remembers that upset against Ohio State in the past. They have some other high-profile upsets of knocking off teams. Certainly capable of pulling off some of those. You look at the Notre Dame game, you look at the Penn State game. Those are 2 games that you look at the Oregon game. Teams they could certainly knock off and upset at home. I have them at 3-9. I think this is more of a transition year. I do like what they're building. I still have concern about the offense. I have concerns about the defense. I think there are some solid players. I do like the offense that Graham Harrell is building up there, but in general, I'm just a little less confident in this team. I think this team is still, 3 years away from being fully competitive. I think they have a lot of work to do. Obviously, being 29th in the nation of recruiting after being 58th, that's a huge jump, a very impressive jump. They're heading in the right direction in that regard. Overall, this is a team that, not going to have a great year, but I think it's a team that's heading in the right direction, excited for the future for the Boilermakers.
I definitely think if they can indeed beat Nebraska early on in the year, a team we expect to be pretty good, then they'll kind of set the tone for what they're able to accomplish. And I don't think they're going to get, beaten by 40 points in every single game. I think they'll compete with some of these harder teams like the Lions, the Irish, and the Ducks. They're not going to win them, though, but I think they could probably maybe steal one of those, and I wouldn't be shocked one bit. 4-8 for me, 3-9 for you, Nick. Appreciate you joining me, as always. Purdue, interesting team here. Again, not many wins, but there's going to be plenty to watch here. If there's nothing else on to watch, I'll certainly be watching Card and the Boilermakers.
Certainly a team to keep an eye on, a team that's exciting, that has a bright future, in my opinion, and really looks forward to seeing what they can do.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.